According to a recent study, climate-driven extreme weather has resulted in over $2 trillion in economic losses worldwide in the last 10 years, with the United States experiencing the most significant impact. This information was released during the COP29 summit held in Azerbaijan. The significance of these findings is that the economic toll from climate change is comparable to the 2008 financial crisis. Joining us now, the climate activist Harjeet Singh. We're also joined by Avinash Mohanty, the head of CCS, IP Global, Bharti Chaturvedi, the environmentalist. We'll also be joined by Ramesh Kurupat and Dr. Vishwas Titale. But let me just go quickly across to Harjeet Singh. Mr. Singh, what exactly is the impact potentially economically on India?
Vishnu, this report is quite telling but not surprising at all, because we have been talking about the impact already reaching trillions of dollars annually. And even for India, there have been several estimates that we are going to be now seeing poverty levels increasing to the extent of 3.5% by 2040. And our GDP is going to go down by the end of the century. So impacts are increasing. And when we lose infrastructure, when we lose economic activities to these rising disasters, we face this crisis. And as you said, it's not just limited to India. Large countries are also experiencing these impacts. But let's recognize that the poor countries and the developing countries are disproportionately affected, and they have less resources to deal with it. And they are not the ones who are responsible for the climate crisis that we are facing right now. So it's a matter of injustice that developed countries who have played primary role in causing the problem are not even providing resources to developing countries to deal with the crisis. And I'm here in Baku at COP29. We are fighting this battle, and developed countries are not putting enough resources on the table.
Avinash Mohanty, when we say that, for example, India has lost $112 billion between 2014 and 2023, the US has lost $934 billion. It basically means that but for climate change, each of these countries would have been a lot more prosperous, right? That's essentially what we're trying to say.
Absolutely. Now, one of the Harjeet just mentioned, everyone, that how much of disproportionately we have been trying to kind of look at climate negotiations at the eye length. We have been trying to shift the goalpost from one thing to the other. And the COP29 is all about creating that accountability on the developed nations who have been historically the highest emitters. And as a result, the most vulnerable and the most poorest have been hit the most. Just let's try to break down this. What does this 2 trillion in 10 years cost of climate change do actually mean for India? For India, IP Global recently launched a study, and what we could find is 85% of our Indian districts are extreme event hotspots. And this is as on 2023, where each kind of district is been impacted by one or the other extreme event at a regular recurrent fashion. Now that's number one. What does it mean in terms of revenue? 2% of Indian INC is going to lose revenue every year. India is going to lose 34 million jobs, especially from the direct kind of sectors, agriculture, manufacturing, so on and so forth, by 2030, and 34 million for an aspiring 5 trillion economy kind of country like India is a bigger number. What does this number mean in terms of injustice, which has been provided to the most vulnerable communities, right?
Right.
That means that some of our sectors like agriculture and power inequity is going to increase largely. And what is more important is all these developed countries have taken half a century to kind of reach their net zero targets, or at least reach at the brink of the net zero targets. But what has happened largely is the developing countries, on the other hand, have kind of only taken less than one quarter of a century. So
Avinash,
that shows the
Avinash, half a second. I just wanted to quickly go across to Bharti. You know, the talks at COP continue in Azerbaijan, and you're looking at trying to ensure that we don't get to that 2-degree mark, after which, you know, change may not be possible as well, or a reversal may not be possible. But the target was always to keep climate change to 1.5 degrees. But if you look at the latest numbers, 2024 is the hottest year on record, and between January and September, global temperatures we're already above 1.5. It's at 1.54 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. So we've already started to breach that maximum threshold which we thought we would never touch, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's even been a warning that if we continue as we are, we could actually hit 3 degrees, which obviously is completely catastrophic. And I do think there's a huge issue here about how we're going to get the money in the developing world. Whether you look at islands, poor nations, we don't even have data, even about Africa. How are you going to get the money just to build climate resilience to the limited degree? Even that is possible. You can't just build resilience to something when it's 55 degrees, So I do think that this COP, which is about money, comes from a space where in the previous times the developed countries have not really significantly contributed their share, and they've not participated in what is a global and highly inequitable problem. In fact, there's also this other data that says 512 billion hours of work were lost in 2023. So can you imagine the kind of incomes that were lost? And who are the people who lose the most incomes? Outdoor workers, they're farmers, they're street vendors, the kinds of people who run the global south, really. So I think what we're saying here is that if we're not going to get a significant amount of money, if green technology is not a global good, and if it's not just put out there and those kinds of things, then in fact we're going to see the kinds of poverty, as Dr. Mohanty just said, that are going to be absolutely astounding. We're going to undo the kind of successes that the global south has seen in the last 25 years. So it's actually quite grim.
Ramesh Gurupat, there's a new change of guard in the United States. There was a legally binding international treaty on climate change adopted by 194 parties in 2015 in Paris, right? It came into force, it's already in force, but is there a real worry that America might withdraw under Trump?
It's a very good evening from me from Baku. I'm Ramesh Kumar, representing International Solar Alliance. It's very difficult for me to comment on that. It's a geopolitical issues, how it is going to affect.
So let me rephrase that question. Let me rephrase that question, Mr. Ramesh Kumar. Yeah. What if the United States was to withdraw? What would the impact be?
Okay, so I think the every country, or I would say the developed countries, talking about the climate change, and then the entire world, the countries understand the vagaries of climate change, and we are actually experiencing that. Having said that, I think the real issue is how. That's the question still. We know that we keep on discussing the problems rather than how to be done, how the fund will flow, what would be the mechanism to create this, addressing the issues of the global south. That's the real question. So I don't know. I don't want to comment on the particular countries, how they are going to look at it, and it's all in the public domain. The real issue is the developed world looking at the emerging markets and the least developed countries and the small developing states. The issues are totally different. So it requires a different approach if you wanted to really help the emerging economies as well as the LDCs and the SIDS countries. How do we create a mechanism so that they are able to adapt to the renewable technologies and thereby inviting the what you call the sustainable growth and taking part in the our journey for the climate issue mitigation. Okay, so this Dr. is the way International Solar Alliance looked at it.
Yeah. Sure, Dr. Vishwas Chitale, COP after COP after any number of international fora, it all ends up being a talk shop. Everybody wants change, no one's willing to pay for it, and the climate keeps changing. Technology has not been transferred. we keep doing these programs. If someone was to play out a program I did on this subject 5 years ago, other than the fact that I didn't have very much gray hair then, the topic and the conversation, and maybe even the panelists would all be the same. No one would know a difference. So my question is, COP this time around in Azerbaijan, is it just that? A talk shop, people go home right after a big international summit where they've had fun and nothing really happens?
Thank you, Vishnu, for raising that really important question. And I joined when Harjit was talking about developed countries not doing enough about it. I think that talk has been always there at the COP. But if we look at intricacies of it, just today itself, we have launched a report which tracks the progress of G20 countries on climate action. And I must say here with disappointment that majority of the G20 countries, especially the developed countries, have done the least in terms of achieving the climate action so far, except for the developing nations like India and South Africa, which have put significant efforts in terms of really being on the track to achieve their net zero goal. Many of the players like the US, Australia, UK, none of them have put significant efforts so far in accelerating the climate action. And I mean, where does that lead us? You were talking about the report, right? You were talking about the acute and chronic risks and the losses that we have looked so far. But the question here is that are the developing countries taking the UNFCCC obligations seriously or not? The question is that are they doing enough to achieve their net zero transition? Are they on track to achieve that? And then also, as we heard from one of the panelists, the climate finance goal. We all, all the developing countries need substantial climate finance in order to come out of this situation of climate risks. For building resilience, of course, we need climate finance, adaptation finance. So this COP, I think everybody is eyeing at that NCQG, new collective quantified goal, and we all should put maximum efforts in order to really make this COP successful in achieving that ambitious target of NCQG.
All right.
It should not be just a talk, and it should not just remain like, okay, there was some talk on NCQG, but it was unsuccessful. I think we are here. I mean, the
definitive
climate change
action on the
impacts are
ground.
here and now. I think
Absolutely.
we have to really take action on it, and we all should work
Absolutely.
together on that action.
Look, I'm just interrupting because I'm out of time, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on this. With record rise in temperatures, so much to be done in terms of dealing with climate change and the economic impact, $2 trillion in 10 years. That's the cost of climate change. It's time we start talking about those numbers as well. Thank you all very much for being with us.